Hello, everyone, and welcome tonight. It's Sunday night, June 28th, 2026. My name is Glenn Rawson. I thank you for being here tonight. And the first thing I'd like to do tonight is thank all of you that are weekly subscribers. Everyone out there that's watching, that's taking the weekly stories. You see, I keep writing stories as I keep traveling and researching, and I write those stories down, we produce them, and we send them out to you for free. It's kind of like a thought for the day, except it's a thought for the week. Every week we send out a story. It doesn't cost you anything. It's a public service that we do. So if you're not one of the weekly subscribers, go to glennrawsonstories.com and we can help you take care of that. You'll get a story every week, usually from church history, which you can then use however you need to. Again, I emphasize there's no cost to it. It's just a public service. All right. And then also I'm here to announce in October of this year, Dennis Lyman and I are going to take another group along with Teton Stage Lines, and we're going to go back out on the Pioneer Trail. We're going to go all the way from Salt Lake out to Nebraska and come back along the major sites of the Pioneer Trail. And we did it earlier this year. It was a great success, so well received, we've decided to do it again. October 2026, the Pioneer Trail. That will include such places as Martin's Cove, Devil's Gate. It will include Guernsey Ruts and Chimney Rock and Scotts Bluff and all of those significant sites along the way, all the way from Nebraska clear to This Is the Place Heritage Park in Salt Lake City. I love that tour because it gives me the opportunity to talk about those great pioneers and tell you the stories about them and give you a real idea of what it was like to have life on the trail and pull a handcart or follow a wagon. Now, there's a special offer. If you sign up right now before August 1st for that trail tour, you'll get $100 off of the cost of the tour. And you'll get this, a free copy of Journal of the Handcart Pioneers will be built into the cost. This is the trail book that I take with me from Casper, Wyoming, back along the trail. This is the book I carry to tell you stories about what happened on the trail. So again, Pioneer Trail Tour, October 2026, $100 off if you signed up now and you get this book for free. But if not, either way, I hope you can come. You would really enjoy what happens out there. Okay, moving on. Guys, tonight's a little bit of a different kind of fireside. I'm going to try a couple things tonight that I don't usually do and that I quit doing 20 years ago. But I'm going to try it again tonight. So I would ask for your faith and prayers. This first story is a commemoration of this. You all know what happened, what anniversary we celebrated yesterday, right? The anniversary of the martyrdom of the prophet Joseph Smith was yesterday, June 27th, 1844, Carthage, Illinois. So in keeping with that, I would like to share this story with you. William Draper joined the Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints in 1833. He was taught and baptized and ordained a priest by Brigham Young, and he was 59 years old at the time. And from that point forward, William and his family followed the saints. By June of 1844, William and his family were living in Green Plains, Illinois, which is not too far from Warsaw, Illinois. One of his neighbors at Green Plains was Colonel Levi Williams. Now, William Draper said, "I there bought a farm on good terms and went to improving. Built me a good house and a small grist mill, and put about 20 acres of land in a good state of cultivation with a good fence around it, and was on good terms with my neighbors, although the most of them, he said, were Gentiles. But they professed to be much pleased with my enterprise in the place, and all went on well with me until sometime in June 1844. Then came June 1844, and all the world of Western Illinois was up in arms against Joseph Smith and the Latter-day Saints, including William's neighbors. Remember, I mentioned Colonel Levi Williams. Well, those neighbors came to William Draper with a proposition which he described as follows, quote, "They came and invited me to go with them to take Joseph, but I refused. They wanted to know if I would go if the governor ordered me to go. And I said, no, I would not go if the devil himself ordered me to go against Joseph. For his people were my people, and where he goes, I will go also." Well, continuing to quote, William said, "This appeared to vex them a little, although we had always been on good terms as neighbors, and they then said, 'Then you will have to leave, for you can't live here, although we like you as a neighbor.'" End of quote. And William said, "So they left me and soon started for Nauvoo with old Colonel Levi Williams as their leader." End of quote. Well, William Draper went on to describe that later that same day they returned with the black still on their faces, a black that he said, quote, "They never could get it from the character of their consciences." The date was June 27th, 1844, the day that mob with Colonel Levi Williams murdered Joseph and Hiram Smith at Carthage jail. For a time after the martyrdom, all was quiet in Hancock County. But when the mob saw that the saints were not leaving, the mobbing and the depredations against the saints began again. William Draper himself was hunted relentlessly, driven from his family, and finally forced out of the county altogether. And that by the people who had once been his friends and his neighbors and praised his work. Well, William Draper and his family finally reached the Salt Lake Valley in 1850. The 76-year-old pioneer settled his family in an area called South Willow Creek. In time, William was called as the bishop, and the settlement grew and prospered. Now today, I can see it from here. When you drive down I-15 and go through the south end of the Salt Lake Valley, you look off to the east up in the corner canyon and you'll see a beautiful temple gleaming on the hill above the community named for William Draper Jr. In my mind, it's altogether fitting that the community of Draper, Utah, and its holy temple both are named for a man who refused to go against Joseph Smith, even if the devil himself ordered him to do it. I hope that we remember that to a measure, we stand with Joseph. Wherever he goes, still, wherever he goes, we go, and we will never turn traitor and turn our back on him. Second story. This is a story about Emily Partridge, okay? She is the daughter of Bishop Edward Partridge, the first bishop of the church. Her story is remarkable. For a time, she was a plural wife to the prophet Joseph Smith. She had no children by the prophet Joseph, and after Joseph was killed, she married President Brigham Young for time and became the mother of 7 of Brother Brigham's children. Emily was tall and slim with a rather dark complexion. She was considered to be dignified as befitted her station as a wife of the president of the church, a very devout woman, and like her father, faithful to the very end to the restored gospel. She would bear her testimony to the very end that Joseph Smith was a prophet of God, called of God. And in her later years, in her advanced years, she spent much of her time doing vicarious work for the dead in the temple. Now, the date of the martyrdom, June 27th, 1844. Emily was there, and she writes about what happened on that day. So I want to quote from something she wrote, June 27th, 1897, 53 years to the day of the martyrdom. At that time, Emily was 73 years old. You know, she provides a perspective on the martyrdom that I really want you to hear. Listen to this. Emily said, "This is the anniversary of the most solemn and sorrowful day ever experienced in all the history of this church. 53 years ago today, our prophet and patriarch fell, martyrs to the cause of truth, slain by the hands of a wicked and bloodthirsty mob, led by those who had once been their sworn friends. Oh, that terrible day, so long to be remembered. Who can portray the gloom and deep sorrow that settled over the people of Nauvoo when the terrible news came from Carthage? It was like a thunderbolt crushing the people to the earth. They were almost paralyzed, prostrated with the deepest grief. My soul," she said, "is harrowed up when I let my mind revert back to those days of sorrow and persecution that followed the prophet Joseph all his life long. His troubles at home being more sad and harder to bear than all the trials that could be heaped upon him by outside enemies. My heart is filled with bitter regret when I think that I might have added even one drop of sorrow to the abundance already heaped upon him. I was intimately acquainted with him for several years, more acquainted with his home life than with his public, or rather his private life outside of his home. I have known him to come in with his head bowed. He would walk the floor back and forth with his hands clasped behind his back, a way he had of placing his hands when his mind was deeply troubled, his countenance showing that he was weighed down with some terrible burden. Many times," she said, "my heart has ached for him. He did not often speak of his outside troubles to his family. Yes," she said, "it is 53 years ago today that he was shot down like an escaped criminal, or rather a caged animal, for he was imprisoned at the time. The law could not touch him, but powder and ball did. Woe to those false friends who entered into the conspiracy and took the most solemn oaths to never cease their efforts until his life was taken. Well, they accomplished their hellish design. I shrink from the awful fact. Joseph was a prophet of God and a friend of man. His was a noble character. All who knew him can testify to that assertion. He was all that the word gentleman would imply. Pure in heart, always striving for right, upholding innocence and battling for the good of all. Oh, how could people so misjudge him? Why could he not have been spared to us a little longer? Perhaps we did not appreciate him as we had ought. I fear we did not. We are not apt to place much value upon our blessings until we are deprived of them. How short-sighted we are. We have to learn wisdom and gain knowledge by sad experience, and may the Lord be merciful and help us to be worthy to meet our dearly beloved friend again. O Lord, how long must we wait before we are permitted to enjoy his society again? Shall we ever be worthy to enjoy and listen to his wise counsel again, and associate with the good and great man that he is, there may have been passages in my past life when I was not as patient as I should have been, but I hope he will forgive me. And I think he will, for he well knew the trying conditions of my life and that I was subject to many disagreeable and humiliating circumstances. And being young and inexperienced, did not always count the cost beforehand. Well, she said, this is all past and gone. I have felt sad and lonely all this day, but have shed no tears. There are griefs too deep for tears. I have been living over again the sorrowful scenes of 53 years ago today. Well, may we weep and mourn. Emily Partridge Smith. Well, Emily lived a comfortable life in Salt Lake City. Her past home given her by President Young was a 2-story home on 3rd East. Emily died December 1899 and was buried in Salt Lake City. Now, this is the first of those unusual things I would like to say to you. If you'll let me do it, and if it works out well, I may do it again. Section 136 of the Doctrine and Covenants. Hang on a second. Okay, there we go. The Lord says this, section 136, verse 36. This is a revelation given to Brigham Young. And the Lord said, for they killed the prophets, and them that were sent unto them, and they have shed innocent blood, which crieth from the ground against them. Point number 1 in the martyrdom. Joseph was innocent and approved of the Lord. He was murdered, like he said, going like a lamb to the slaughter. He was the lamb. Carthage was the slaughter. Therefore marvel not at these things, the Lord said, for you are not yet pure. You cannot yet bear my glory. But you shall behold it if you are faithful in keeping all my words that I've given you from the days of Adam to Joseph Smith, whom I did call upon by mine angels and my ministering servants and by mine own voice out of the heavens to bring forth my work. There it is. At the very end of Joseph's life, the Lord says, I called him, I approved of his work, and he is with me. Your choice is to accept this as a revelation or reject it all. Speaking of the prophet Joseph, which foundation he did lay and was faithful, and I took him to myself. The prophet Joseph Smith is with the Lord even now. And now here's my point. Many have marveled because of his, Joseph Smith's, death, but it was needful that he should seal his testimony with his blood, that he might be honored and the wicked might be condemned. That is a verse fraught with meaning. Joseph had to die. Whenever there's a testament, there must of necessity be the death of the testator or the testator. Or in other words, Joseph opened up this dispensation standing as the first and foremost witness. And there is an eternal law somewhere that decrees that Joseph had to give his life to seal his testimony. To seal it means to make it lasting and permanent and binding. No one living today can look back under any circumstances and ever, with any evidence, claim that Joseph was lying, that Joseph made it all up, that he was not serious. No, he gave the last full measure of his devotion, his blood and his life, to assert that he was telling the truth and had seen all that he said that he had seen. Moreover, the Lord goes on to say that he might be honored and the wicked might be condemned. It played right into the hands of the Almighty when that mob stormed the jail, June 27th, 1844. They were there because the Lord didn't bring them there. They came of their own accord. It was in the Lord's heart that Joseph needed to die a martyr's death. But murder and savagery was in the hearts of the mob that attacked that jail. They acted out their murderous deed, and the Lord Almighty allowed them to come. They will stand accountable, and they have already. They stand accountable before Almighty God for the deeds they did that day. The punishments they get will be because of the deeds they did, and it will be just. But in so doing what they did, not only did they receive their just judgment, but Joseph Smith will be honored for all time as a man willing to give his last full measure of devotion, his blood and his life, for the love of God and for the service of all mankind. Yes, I know that today there are people who die as martyrs all the time for unjust causes. But look at the life of Joseph Smith. What did he bring forth to all mankind? What was his feeling toward all mankind? As has been stated before and many times, Joseph was a friend of man. He loved God and Jesus Christ and lived the teachings of the Savior with everything he had. There was not one particle of hatred and animosity or deception in him. He lived for the service and benefit and love of all mankind. He lived and he died the Lord's servant. He died a just and holy martyr. Now, what do I want you to understand? That what happened June 27th, 1844, was the most devastating and sorrowful event in the history of this church. Nothing like it had happened before or has even come close since. It blasted, as it were, a deep hole into our psyche, into our hearts. And today, people still weep when they go to Carthage. And our hearts are softened when we realize all that Joseph did for service to the Lord. He is being honored by that martyrdom. It was necessary that he die. His testimony of the Book of Mormon and of all that he taught is now sealed, as it were, as tightly and as firmly and as unbreakable as any bond can be. And his witness with his blood is binding upon the people of this world. That I want you to understand. Carrying on. Next story. I hope this story is well received. Okay? Maybe it was a sign of things to come. I don't know. October of 1839, Jacob met and married Lucinda. They were both young, but something was wrong. Instead of honeymoon joy, Jacob felt, quote, condemned for what he had done. He got married, but in so doing, he had disobeyed the Lord, and somehow he knew it. Well, in 1841, the gospel was taught to Jacob in Wisconsin, and Jacob joined the church, baptized March 3rd, 1842. He took his family then on to Nauvoo, And then finally, after the death of the prophet Joseph, he went on to the west. Now, it was on that journey, going from Nauvoo to winter quarters, that things began to unravel. He wrote this, quote, "My wife proved to be a treacherous, mischievous woman, which proved to be a great annoyance to my life. She took every advantage she could to oppose me in everything that was good, teaching her children that their father was a bad man, and making trouble in any way she could think of, telling falsehoods to the authorities of that branch of the church. I told her that she must mend her ways or I should leave the home. She said she would do as she damn well pleased. I shall always remember she made mischief in every possible way, selling everything she could get her hands upon. I saw that such a course of things was certain ruin to me and my children. She sought to prejudice the minds of the people against me as much as possible." Well, end of quote. It finally came to a head when his wife's last words to him were, as she thrust the baby, "Here, take the Mormon brats." And she left, went away to the east, never to return. Well, Jacob has 4 motherless children, one of them a baby. What are you going to do? Jacob prayed mightily to know what to do. And then, and this is my point, he experienced an unusual dream. Remember now, he is journeying between Mount Pisgah and winter quarters. In that dream, he saw a large, well-built log cabin with a neat fence around it and a rock walk leading up to it. In his dream, he saw a widow living in that cabin with 2 children, and it was revealed to him that they were to become part of his family. And other things he also saw, as we'll see later. Well, that's a remarkable dream by anybody's standard. Jacob continued his way west. As he's approaching Council Bluffs, Iowa, coming down the road, he saw that cabin, the one from his dream, saw it right next to the road and stopped and stared at it and realized it was the same cabin from his dream. Inside that cabin lived Rachel Judd and her 2 children. Jacob's biographer records what happens next. For several days, she, Rachel, had a peculiar feeling come over her. She had a conviction that a man would come to her door that day, that very day, who would become her future husband. The thought had somewhat preyed upon her mind. She had seemed by instinct to determine how she would be able to take all her things with her. So sure was she that he would come that day that she had dressed in her Sunday best and packed her trunk. The knock on the door didn't seem to surprise her. The first words she heard after she bade the stranger to enter were, quote, and here it is, "My name is Jacob Hamblin. I was impressed to come to your home and ask you to be my wife." Now, mind you, they've never met. Her reply was, "I am Rachel Judd, and I am willing to marry you, but it will be impossible for us to have any children." Jacob remembered his dream and replied, "My name is Jacob, yours is Rachel, and we will have 2 sons and name them Joseph and Benjamin." This all proved to be true. Continuing, Jacob asked, "Are you ready?" And Rachel replied, "Yes, wait until I get my things." End of quote. It was true love at first sight, prompted by revelation. Jacob and Rachel Hamblin were married immediately by the Justice of the Peace and later at the Endowment House in Salt Lake City, September 30th, 1849. And thus was the tender mercy of the Lord received by Jacob Hamblin. He and Rachel went on to the Rocky Mountains and a life of remarkable service. Referring to his marriage to Rachel, Jacob said, quote, I have peace at home in my family ever since I have lived with this kind and affectionate companion. I have tasted the bitter and know well how to appreciate the sweet. Jacob Hamblin would go on to become the buckskin apostle of Southern Utah. Let's take a break. How are you doing? Are you well? Is your July 4th celebration shaping up to be wonderful, memorable, as befits America 250? I hope it is. Now, I have another tour I would like to tell you about. When we think about church history, we think about going to New York and Palmyra and Carthage and places like this. But have you ever thought about taking a church history tour to Hawaii? More specifically, to Oahu, starting there? January 23rd, 2027, we are taking a group and going back to Hawaii for church history. It'll be the best tour there we have ever done. We'll spend from the 23rd to the 30th going all over the island of Oahu, and we'll study all the places of church history. And as an added bonus, you get Hawaii in the wintertime. You get the beaches and Waikiki and Honolulu and the Pearl Harbor Memorial and all the Hawaiian history and the church history in that 1 week tour. Now, if you'd like to go, and I'm inviting you, I am going to go. But if you'd like to come with me, well, call 801-997-8907 and sign up. Again, that's 801-997-8907, or just go to glennrawsonstories.com. I would love to have you come. Okay? All right. Now, I would like to spend the rest of this fireside talking about America 250. I hope you don't mind. I know you're hearing a lot about it, but there are some things about it I would like to say. And the first may seem, well, unusual. Okay. Liberty is precious beyond all measure. It wasn't just drama when Patrick Henry said, "Give me liberty," or "Give me death." I know what he meant, and I know what he felt, and I know a little about why. This story will illustrate how precious it is and why. There have been times in our history as members of the Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints when the rights and liberties declared by the Declaration of Independence and protected by the Constitution were blatantly taken away from us as a people. This is one of them. And I'm asking you to go back in your imagination and feel what this must have been like. October 27th, 1838. Missouri Governor Lilburn W. Boggs issued the following executive order from the governor's office. As you hear this, consider today if a governor of a state or a king in a country or a president or ruler were to issue such an order today upon you as a people. Here's the order. Place, headquarters of the militia, City of Jefferson, October 27th, 1838, General John B. Clark, Sir. And the governor writes, since the order of this morning to you, directing you to cause 400 mounted men to be raised within your division, I have received by Amos Reese, Esquire of Ray County, and Wiley C. Williams, Esquire, one of my aides, information of the most appalling character, which entirely changes the face of things and places the Mormons in the attitude of open and avowed defiance of the laws and of having made war upon the people of this state. Your orders are, therefore, writing to General Clark, to hasten your operation with all possible speed. The Mormons must be treated as enemies and must be exterminated or driven from the state if necessary for the public peace. Their outrages are beyond all description. If you can increase your force, you are authorized to do so to any extent you may consider necessary. I have just issued orders to Major General Willick of Marion County to raise 500 men and to march them to the northern part of Davies and there unite with General Donovan of Clay, who has been ordered with 500 men to proceed to the same point for the purpose of intercepting the retreat of the Mormons to the north. They have been directed to communicate with you by express. You can also communicate with them if you find it necessary. Instead, they're proceeding as first directed to reinstate the citizens of Davies in their homes. You will proceed immediately to Richmond and then operate against the Mormons. The whole force will be placed under your command. I am very respectfully your obedient servant, Governor L.W. Boggs, Commander-in-Chief. End of quote. Well, as a result of that order, 15,000 Latter-day Saints approximately were driven from the state of Missouri by an armed force under state authority. After willfully surrendering, after surrendering of their own accord, the saints were treated as a conquered people. They were deprived wholesale of liberty, rights, property, and in cases, even life. The atrocities committed against the Latter-day Saints in October 1838 through 39 against us as a people are absolutely unspeakable. Now, the rest of the story. Recognizing the injustice committed by his predecessor, Governor Christopher Bond, Kit Bond, issued a subsequent executive order dated June 25th, 1976. He said, quote, whereas on October 27th, 1838, the governor of the state of Missouri, Lilburn W. Boggs, signed an order calling for the extermination or expulsion of Mormons from the state of Missouri, and whereas Governor Boggs' order clearly contravened the rights to life, liberty, and property, and religious freedom as guaranteed by the Constitution of the United States as well as the state of Missouri. And whereas in this bicentennial year, as we reflect on our nation's heritage, the exercise of religious freedom is without question one of the basic tenets of our free democratic republic. Now, therefore, I, Christopher S. Bond, Governor of the state of Missouri, by virtue of the authority vested in me by the Constitution and the laws of the state of Missouri, do hereby order as follows, expressing on behalf of all Missourians our deep regret for the injustice and undue suffering which was caused by the 1838 order, I hereby rescind Executive Order 44, dated October 27th, 1838, issued by Governor Lilburn W. Boggs. In witness whereof, I have hereunto set my hand and caused to be affixed the great seal of the state of Missouri in the city of Jefferson on this 25th day of June, 1976. Christopher S. Bond. End of quote. You see, the memories and experiences of tyranny and oppression are for us as Latter-day Saints, well, those memories are still raw and very personal. It happened to our families. It is because of all that we have suffered as a people that the Almighty has taught you and me to cherish freedom and revere the Declaration of Independence and the United States Constitution. We cherish those because by experience we have been deprived of the blessings of both. Happy 4th of July. And since it is that holiday coming up this week, I believe it is altogether fitting, considering what is coming up later this week, that I would quote to you the following, dated July 4th, 1776. Please find yourself in these words. Quote, when in the course of human events, it becomes necessary for one people to dissolve the political bands which have connected them with another, and to assume among the powers of the earth the separate and equal station to which the laws of nature and of nature's God entitled them, a decent respect to the opinions of mankind requires that they should declare the causes which impel them to the separation. We hold these truths to be self-evident, that all men are created equal, that they are endowed by their Creator with certain unalienable rights, that among these are life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness, that to secure these rights, governments are instituted among men, deriving their just powers from the consent of the governed, that whenever any form of government becomes destructive of these ends, it is the right of the people to alter or to abolish it, and to institute new government, laying its foundation on such principles and organizing its powers in such form as to them shall seem most likely to affect their safety and happiness. We, therefore, the representatives of the United States of America, in General Congress assembled, appealing to the Supreme Judge of the world for the rectitude of our intentions, do, in the name and by the authority of the good people of these colonies, solemnly publish and declare that these united colonies are and of our right ought to be free and independent states. And for the support of this declaration, with a firm reliance on the protection of divine providence, we mutually pledge to each other our lives, our fortunes, and our sacred honor. End of quote. Under the hot fires of opposition, those last words were not idle rhetoric. As they pledged, so too they were required to give, some even to the laying down of their lives. If you will forgive me, I have lived my life as a free man. And most of that life I've been oblivious to the gift that's been given me and the price that's been paid for me. Now, I pray the God of heaven that He will open our eyes, all of us, that we might understand the precious value of liberty, and that we will hold fast to those principles and those politicians that are inch by inch trying to take these things away. The bigger government becomes, the less free you are. The closer and more intimate government becomes in your lives, making rules, and in your pocket, taking your money, the less free you are. I pray that every person will make this Declaration of Independence anew, that in our own hearts we will declare our independence from every form of tyranny and oppression under the sun. So if we're saying it once again, when freedom is lost, only blood will buy it back. August 27th, 1776, just a month and some days after the Declaration of Independence. Place, Long Island, New York. The British attacked General George Washington's army and defeated them in New York. The Americans were forced to retreat northward toward Brooklyn Heights. British forces at the time numbered approximately 32,000 well-trained and well-equipped soldiers, reinforced by hundreds of British ships in the harbor, at least 73 of them. The Americans, ragged in number, were trapped with their backs to the East River. General Howe dug in and held the Americans in place, biding his time. He ordered his men to carefully advance on the American lines, digging a succession of ever-encroaching trenches. Seemingly, there was nothing for him to worry about. His superior force would surround and hold the Americans in place against the river until he was ready to attack. There was no way those rebels could escape, as the warships protected the water, and anybody who came up the river or down it, those warships could blow them out of the water. The defeated Americans fully expected the British to attack at any moment, and they were trapped. However, on August 28th, the weather turned cold. It began to rain. A cold, drenching downpour, the start of a nor'easter that brought still further misery to the defeated American army. The following day, the rain continued. The storm continued unabated and exacerbated the discomfort of the unsheltered American troops. Moreover, the contrary winds prevented those British warships from coming on up the river and assailing the Americans from behind. So there was at least that as a blessing. The outlook, though, was growing more and more grim by the moment. As Howe's forces continued digging and advancing in their trenches by approaches, they reached as close as 600 yards from Fort Putnam Thursday night, August 29th, 1776. At 7 o'clock that night, the American army was mysteriously ordered to pack up and get ready to move. They were told they were attacking the enemy by night. Some of the soldiers and the officers would have thought, "Are you crazy? That's a suicide move." In fact, it looked so grim that others among the Americans dictated their last will to their comrades. They began to march toward the Brooklyn ferry landing. The men marched and then stood in the dark and waited. Then about 11 o'clock that night, the wind died down and a small armada of boats manned by Captain John Glover and his Massachusetts sailors crossed the river from New York to Brooklyn. Suddenly it became clear they were not attacking the enemy, but the Americans were retreating. As historian David McCullough has written, in a feat of extraordinary seamanship at the helm and manning the oars hour after hour, Glover and his men negotiated the river's swift, contrary currents in boats so loaded with troops and supplies, horses and cannons, that the water was often but inches below the gunwales, and all in pitch dark with no running lights. Few men ever had so much riding on their skill or were under so much pressure and performed so superbly. End of quote. The army crossed the river in profound silence. Wheels were wrapped and muffled. No one spoke above a whisper. They moved through the night like specters. End of quote. And all of this in mud and mire. Meanwhile, in sight of the British, American guards and sentries marched back and forth, stood in place, giving the ruse that they were holding their ground. All the while, they were slowly being rotated in and out into the retreat. At the ferry landing, everyone worked furiously, but it was not enough, and it was not fast enough. As morning approached, most of the army had not yet been moved across the river. Time was running out, and if the British saw them in daylight, they would immediately attack and wipe out the Americans, and the revolution would be over. They were doomed. And then it happened. It was called by them a miracle. Just at daybreak, a heavy fog settled in over the whole of Brooklyn, enshrouding the British and concealing the actions of the retreating Americans. The fog was so thick that, quote, one could scarcely discern a man at 6 yards, end of quote. Yet, that fog did not touch the New York side of the river. It was just before 7 a.m. when the last of the Americans crossed the river to the safety of New York. It was reported that General Washington was the last man to leave Brooklyn. As David McCullough summarized, in a single night, 9,000 troops had escaped across the river. Not a life was lost. End of quote. Another inexplicable miracle of the American Revolution. If you would permit me again. I feel very strongly about this, so much so that on July the 3rd, I'm going to be teaching these principles again in greater detail at Cherry Peak Resort up above Preston. It'll be a night of liberty and celebration. July 3rd, Cherry Peak Resort, just outside of Preston. I will be teaching and serving you dinner. If you can come, I'd appreciate you being there. But this is in part what I want to teach. And it came to pass that I beheld the Spirit of God, that it wrought upon other Gentiles, and they went forth out of captivity upon the many waters. Those Gentiles were the Europeans who came to America. And it came to pass that I beheld many multitudes of the Gentiles upon the land of promise. That's America. Many Europeans came to America. And in verse 15, it says that they prospered, that the Spirit of the Lord was upon the Gentiles. They did prosper and obtain the land of America for their inheritance. And it came to pass that I, Nephi, beheld that the Gentiles who had gone forth out of captivity did humble themselves before the Lord, and the power of the Lord was with them. And I beheld that their mother Gentiles were gathered together upon the waters and upon the land also to battle against them. So England, the mother Gentiles, attacks the Gentiles in America who have been prospered by the hand of God and who have come forth, quote, out of captivity. And I beheld that the power of God was with the Americans, and also that the wrath of God was upon all those that were gathered together against them to battle. And I, Nephi, beheld that the Gentiles that had gone forth out of captivity were delivered by the power of God out of the hands of all other nations. Brothers and sisters, on the 4th of July, 1776, the world was in captivity, subjugated by kings and monarchs, by parliaments, dictators, and rulers. Moreover, they were subjugated by class distinction, economically oppressed, held down all over the world. And then July 4th was like a bursting forth of light. The Declaration of Independence is formally announced to the world. And the shackles of bondage and oppression are thrown off, and men are brought forth out of captivity. And the American Republic is born. I witness to you that July 4th, 1776, not only declared the independence of Americans, but it set forth in motion the stone cut out of the mountain without hands that would bring liberty across the globe and take men out of captivity who were willing. July 4th changed the world. On the night of July 3rd, I will tell you more and develop that even further. My dear friends, happy 4th of July. Good night.